Hi, I'm Phil, and this is Filled with Facts, and today we are making beer. Why beer? Because it's fun, it's unique, and it gives you a great opportunity to really discover what you like about beer, what you like to drink in the beers, how to brew them, and all around give you a little bit extra knowledge, and that can never be a bad thing. As you can see here, I have water, I have barley, I have a muddling bag, I have hops, I have Star San, which is going to be the sanitizer we're going to use, I have a malt extract, which is dark roasted, and I have malt powder. Malt powder or the extract are going to give you the same result with slightly different flavors. I happen to really enjoy the dark malt extract, but I also like some of the flavors you get from using a malt powder. So I'm going to show you my ratio, and you can feel free to play with that as much as you would like. Let's talk about sanitizer for a second. So I use Star San. I fill this tub up with water. I add the appropriate amount of Star San. I mix, and then everything that's going to touch my brew at all sits in here. You can use your sink if you don't want a bucket. However, as you're going to see later on in this video, I'm going to use the sink to cool my pot down. So having it filled with sanitizer and equipment might make that difficult. You can use whatever you want, and there's also tons of different sanitizers out there. All you really need is a sanitizer that is food grade safe. Okay, so to start, we're going to take our muddling bag. We are going to open it, and you really want to try to get in there. It's just going to make it a little bit easier. Now I have half a pound of ground dark roasted barley. And I'm going to try doing this without making a huge mess. I'm still going to make a mess. Once you have your grains in the bag, just tie up the end. And next, we're going to get the pot ready. This is my cooking pot for beer. This is going to be for the boil that we're about to do. I'm only making a gallon today. This holds way more than a gallon of liquid. That is what you want. This stuff is going to foam. It's going to boil. It's going to be big. And you don't want it to overflow and just destroy your stove and get everywhere and get everything sticky. Let's not do that today, and we'll have a good time. So let's get started on making our wort. Before I forget to mention, when I say making a wort, I mean unfermented beer. If you put everything together today and you don't add yeast, it's called a wort. It's the same if you're making a wine or a mead. The unfermented product is called a must. Doesn't really matter what you call it, it's still going to be beer, or it's still going to be wine. But for technical terms, and so you can follow along, today we're making a wort that we're then going to ferment into a stout beer. Now we're going to take 1 gallon of water. I'm using Crystal Glacier's natural spring water. You don't have to go out and buy water. If your tap tastes good, use your tap. I'm only using this because I know it's an exact gallon, and that makes my life a little bit easier. But I've brewed beer with my tap water before, and it comes out just fine. So use whatever you like, whatever tastes good. I will say don't use any of those like super expensive workout waters, anything that has extra electrolytes and stuff put in. They don't really brew that well. They're also very pricey, so you don't really want to, spend all that money on water. I'm just going to add this right in. Now we have our barley. I'm going to put it in. The trick is you don't want it to touch the bottom. So I'm going to put it, and I'm going to have it wrap around the side. Lid on. I'm going to turn my heat on. I'm going to put it to about medium heat because it's not going to really boil. You kind of want it to simmer, and you're just going to leave it in here for the next hour or so. I'm going to set a timer for an hour, and I'm going to rejoin you then. And okay, so it's been an hour. The alarm just went off. So the first thing you're going to want to do is kill the heat. Now carefully remove the lid. And you can look right inside. We got this beautiful dark liquid. And you're going to notice about this point that your house smells like you're baking bread. Sorry about that. Yeah. So next we're going to do is remove the muddling bag. Alright, so now you want to remove this bag and you want to add about 2 cups of water right over it. And what that's going to do is get any extra bits out of the bag and into your wort. You also want to add about 2 cups because that's probably what you lost when you were making this. You're going to have an urge right now to squeeze this bag. I'm going to tell you it's a bad idea. Don't squeeze this bag. It'll be a bad time for everybody. You can save this bag, and there are a lot of things you can do baking-wise with it. Maybe sometime I'll take the effort to figure out what that is exactly. For today's purposes, it's done. So we're not going to use it anymore. Now you're going to want to build your wort. I'm going to start with sanitized, air-dried measuring cups. And we're going to do about 2 cups of powdered malt extract. And yes, there's definitely easier ways to do this. I'm going to add about 1 pound of dark, pure malt extract. This is going to give us those rich, deep flavors we're looking for. And then I'm going to add the hops. We'll talk a little bit more about hops in a minute, but for this recipe, I'm using a half tablespoon of hop petals. Now we're going to stir. Stir it well. You really want to break up everything in there. You want all the powders to go around. You want all the liquid to mix together. You want it to be good. If there's any bits of anything still not fully in this pot, when you boil it, they're going to settle at the bottom. You're going to get really burnt flavors in your beer. And it's probably not what you want. So when it comes to hops, you have a few different options. A lot of people put hops in at different stages throughout the boiling. You have the initial hopping, then you have about 15 minutes in, then you have about 15 minutes left. It really depends how much hop flavor you want compared to how much bitter flavor you want. This is a stout beer I'm making, so I'm going to want a lot of that bitterness to come out, and I really don't want a lot of the hoppiness to come into play. So I'm only going to hop this beer once, and that's going to be at the initial start of the boil. If you want more hoppiness in your beer, what you do is wait for about 15 minutes into the boil, add a little bit more. At this stage, you're going to get a little bit of hoppiness and a little bit of bitterness out of it. If you want really hoppy beer, if you're one of those IPA freaks who just love that really hoppy flavor, at 15 minutes left in the boil, that's when you want to add your hops, or at least the rest of your hops. What that's going to do is extract all the hoppiness and leave that into your final product. It really depends what your taste is, what you're going for when you're brewing. As I said, I'm not going to be adding those extra intervals, so you don't really have to, you're not going to see me do it, so I just want to let you know that it's an option, but I'm not doing it today. Okay, once you have this all mixed, now you have a wort. The next thing you want to do is boil this down. We're going to boil it for an hour. That's going to really just cook it to its perfection. And then we're going to talk about hops and the different things you can do with them. So, let's turn your stove to a boil. This time I'm going to leave the lid off. I don't want it to have the lid on for this. I want it to be able to evaporate and do its thing. So, keep that in mind. Okay, so we're about 30 minutes into the boil, and at this point, I want to take a second to just say the yeast matters. Now, when I say the yeast matters, it does and it doesn't. Today I'm using a Safale 04 dry ale yeast. This was made specifically for beer. It's going to do the things it needs to do, and it's going to give me a good product at the end. If all you have is wine yeast and you put that into your beer, you might get a slightly stronger beer. It's going to stop at a certain percentage either way. It's just not the right yeast for the job, but it will make beer. If you have bread yeast, I mean, go for it. You'll probably have a slightly weaker beer. It's probably going to have a lot more bread tones to it, and that might not be such a bad thing depending on what kind of beer you're making. I like to use the yeast that will help my brew to be the best it can possibly go up to. So I want it to have the right characteristics, the right flavors, and take the appropriate amount of time to brew it. What I have here is about half a cup of water, 4 ounces. I have a half teaspoon of white sugar, and then I have 1 tablespoon of the yeast. Now the reason we do this is it's not a yeast starter. That's a whole different thing, and that's something you could look into. All I'm doing right now is hydrating this yeast and giving it about 20 minutes to just do something so that I know that this yeast is alive, so that when I have a final wort ready, this is also ready, it's alive, and it'll start to colonize rather quickly. You can just pour the yeast directly into your brew, and it will probably start up. But I have a lot of yeast. I keep it in my fridge. I don't remember how old this is exactly, and I want to make sure it's alive before I put it into the actual wort at the end. It's just going to save me time later on. If something was wrong, I know now. I don't have to wait to find out. Okay, so it's been an hour. Our wort is done cooking. The next thing you want to do is cool this down. There's a lot of controversy on this. There's a lot of tools you could buy to do this. You can buy all sorts of ice wands. They make what's called a wort chiller. If this is something you're new to, and you don't really know if you're going to do this a lot, or you don't want to invest all that extra money into it, it's okay, it's good. I'm going to show you a very easy way to cool this down. I'm also going to say, I know people who brew who don't take the extra effort to cool it down. They just kind of let it come down on its own. All you're looking to do is get this liquid below 100 degrees so that you don't instantly kill your yeast when you add it to this. So let me show you my process. Okay, so I'm going to take the pot. I'm going to place it into my sink. Again, this is why we couldn't use the sanitizer in the sink, because right now it would be full of water and equipment and wouldn't work really well. Then I'm going to put the knob down so the hose is on the side of the pot. I'm going to add a few ice trays. You don't have to go crazy. This will work. And that's it. So I'm going to let water run around the side of the pot. I'm going to let the sink fill up. I'm going to keep an eye on this. This is only going to take about maybe 15-20 minutes, and I feel it's super I wouldn't say critical, but it's important that you stay in the same room as this pot right now. You want to monitor it. You want to make sure the water doesn't overcome the pot, because that's a lot of work that you put into it. You don't want to waste it. This is going to fill up a little bit. It's going to cool the sides of the pot down. You could stir this as much as you want. You actually want to get a little bit of oxygen into the product at this point anyway, so go for that. And once this is cool, I'll show you what the next step is. Okay, so this is now around 90 degrees. Temperature is super important, and it's also something you don't want to stress and overthink. There are suggested temperatures for different beers, different wines, that kind of thing. Here's the bottom line to it. If you put it over 100 degrees, 110, you kill your yeast. They're dead. They're not gonna do anything. If you put it below 34 degrees, your yeast are just gonna go dormant. And again, they're not gonna do anything. If you keep it a little on the warmer side, in my experience, at the beginning, they're gonna start to work a little bit faster. And then whatever temperature the room is that you keep the brew in while it's working, it'll eventually just even itself out. So with that said, I have a sanitized carboy. I'm using the wide mouth version today, and only because I'm out of the other kind, the kind that look like a jug. Either way is fine. I just like to use these more for a secondary fermentation when I actually might have to get into the brew a little bit. For the first 2 weeks that this beer is in here, we're not going to touch it. So it's a little unnecessary, but it's going to still give us the same result. I have a turkey baster, and I have a cylinder. And this is that critical step that I was trying to say before. You really can't skip. And I mean, you can. Absolutely, you put this and the yeast in there and something will happen. Here's where it gets tricky. If this stalls, or doesn't start up, or ends early, you're not gonna know, and you're not gonna know anything about it. If you wanna know how much alcohol is in your final product, this is a good way to find out. There are other ways, there are other kits you can buy that will tell you how much alcohol is in something. But this is just easy, and honestly, it's kind of cool. This is the hydrometer. And it's very simple. It has some weights at the bottom. It has a scale on the side. They probably give you a few different readings. What you're looking for is the specific gravity. You're going to put it right in. It's going to float. And you just want to get a simple reading. So I have 10.09, which is a little high. It might mean that there's less liquid in here than I believe there is. So we're gonna get this into this vessel. And for today's purposes, I'm gonna use an auto siphon. You can just pour this directly into here. I didn't put my hops in anything. I just let them go in here and float around for the last hour. I don't want them to be in the final fermenting vessel, so I'm going to try to get them out using the auto siphon. I could just put a mesh screen down and pour it. Alright, so once you get all the product into here, that's when there's a couple more things to take into consideration. There's a lot of headroom here. When you're fermenting, what you want to do is keep air out, and headroom is a good way to do that. This is a little on the lower side, and I'm going to say that's okay. This is going to have a lot of gases coming off of it while it's fermenting, It's going to create a nice little cushion anyway. So I'm not too worried about anything getting in. I'm using an airlock, so I know that nothing's getting in through that. Also, beer in the first 72 hours, or I should say a wort in the first 72 hours, as it starts to activate, it's going to bubble up. I've never seen this happen with wine or a must, but I have seen it happen with beer. It's not going to ruin your beer if it starts to over ferment. But what will happen is it will force the airlock out and get all over wherever you're storing this, which in my case is a closet. I don't want to ruin everything in there. So I'm going to give it a little extra headroom. I'm going to say that's okay. I have my yeast, which is definitely activated. I'm going to go ahead and pour that right in. We're going to cap this off. I'm going to give it a good shake. Make sure you cover the little socket at the top. And then all we need all we're going to need is an airlock, which this is an airlock. They're super inexpensive. There's links below. Don't skip this. If you skip it on the airlock, you won't know at the beginning if it's doing anything, because you won't see any bubbles coming out of this. And there's other things you can use, but I find the airlock is just a really convenient, inexpensive way to monitor it. Also, bugs, air, anything else that might want to get into your brew, they're not getting through this. They might end up in the first chamber, but they'll never get through the whole configuration. It'll never get in. And there we go. We got beer. Alright guys, so I think I'm going to start ending my videos with what I call final facts or final thoughts. And we can go over what we just did. And that was making beer. You can see I put a label on it. I didn't really feel it was necessary to film it. All it is what kind of beer it is, the specific gravity, and the date. This is going to help me keep an eye on this and monitor it throughout its fermentation. Also, this is not this. It's a earlier thing. Okay, so today we made a wort, which is now going to ferment into a stout beer. It wasn't that complicated. The recipe was pretty straightforward. I hope I defunked it a little bit for you guys. Like, maybe answered some questions, or maybe made some stuff simpler than it might have been thought to be. I want to keep putting out videos. I would love to know what you guys want to see. Maybe some common misconceptions or things that you just need to see it firsthand, or you want to see it done to give you the confidence to do it. I'm definitely going to make more beers. I definitely have some wines and meads to show you guys. So we're going to have a lot of fun, and hopefully your brews come out amazing. So until next time, guys, cheers.